Salt on the rim. I used to think the sound of a marriage was quiet. The clink of ice against a glass, the whisper of linen being turned down, a laugh that lands softly and stays. Maybe that's why I became a set designer, because I believed the way we arrange a room can hold people together. Put a chair here, an amber lamp there, a bowl of limes within reach. Invite the eye to rest and the body to belong. My name is Maya. For a decade I built worlds that disappear when the curtain falls. My husband Aaron built ones that live forever in the cloud. Code, he liked to say, is just choreography for machines. He talked about servers the way I talk about fabric, how a weave can hold or sag, how a seam can carry the weight of the entire costume without anyone noticing. We met over a spilled drink, not a metaphor, an actual Moscow mule he swore he didn't want but finished anyway. He apologized, I laughed, we ended up walking in the rain because neither of us had an umbrella and both of us wanted to keep talking. We married 2 years later on a rooftop with paper lanterns and a trio of violinists who kept missing the same note in Moon River. It didn't matter, we were the melody. For a long time we moved like one mind. He would finish the sentence I was building in tape on the floor, I would finish the line of code he'd abandoned in the margin of a napkin. When the world turned frightening or loud, he built us playlists and I built us dinners. If there is a religion of ordinary days, we were devout. The first crack didn't sound like glass. It sounded like a ping, a notification on my phone that a device connected to our shared account, the AirTag Aaron had tucked into his camera bag, was traveling across the city late on a Tuesday. He wasn't a night person, he wasn't a bar person, and he had told me casually, I'm wiped going to bed early. The blue dot on the map stopped at a boutique hotel near the river, the one with brass elevators and jungle wallpaper. I watched the dot still itself like a held breath. I told myself a story. He'd grabbed drinks with a client. He'd met a college friend who was passing through town. The hotel bar was famous for its agave collection. Anything can be explained by a good tequila. The next day I found a receipt in the pocket of a jacket I was taking to the cleaners, 2 palomas, a plate of shrimp skewers, a dessert listed as tres leches for 2, and the time stamp that matched the dot. When Aaron came home that evening carrying flowers and a grin, I noticed a nick on his neck. The kind you get from a zipper if you lean forward too fast, or the kind you get from a careless kiss. I did not ask him where he'd been. I rearranged books on the shelf so that spines I loved would land beside one another, color meeting color like strangers becoming friends. That night when he braided his fingers behind my head and leaned in to kiss me, my whole body paused. He felt it. You okay? He asked into my mouth. Ma, I said, which could be yes or no depending on the way you taste it. Theater rehearsals began for a new production, a narrow fever of a play about a couple who keep rewriting the past. We built a living room on wheels that slid forward and back as the actors argued, a domestic boat inside a storm. The director hired a choreographer to stage the scene transitions like small dances. Her name was Wren. She ate apples down to the seeds and always had graphite on her fingers. She had a way of leading with her ribs, as if her heart had decided to go ahead and the rest of her refused to be left behind. I am not the kind of woman who begins again with a stranger. That's what I believed anyway. But life makes of belief a salt rim. You lick it, you say how nice, and then the liquor hits. Wren watched the actors turn the set into a suggestion, one chair close to another, a blanket left deliberately askew, and she said to me, not looking away from the stage, "You design rooms people can confess in." What does that even mean? It means when your lamp is on, the truth tends to sit down. Wren taught the actors how to breathe through a pause the way you breathe through a stitch in your side. I built an alcove that resembled a window seat without the window. During one long day, we found ourselves alone in the back of the house, the theater emptied of its noise. Wren leaned her shoulders against the velvet wall and let herself sink. If you were going to run away, she asked, where would you go? Somewhere with a kitchen that has a door to the outside, I said, so you can bring in the morning. She laughed without moving her mouth. The way you talk makes me hungry. Hungry how? Like a room with a bowl of limes. She was not flirting, she was telling the truth in the only grammar she trusted, sensation. On a Thursday I followed the blue dot again. It led to a different hotel, smaller, the kind that hides behind a florist shop and a discreet keypad. I swiped through photos of the lobby online, velvet stools the color of cherries, a glass case of pastries like sugared jewels. I pictured him there with someone and felt not rage but a delete key being pressed in the center of me. When he came home with rain along his eyelashes and said, "God, the subway," I set down my glass so carefully you could have heard the breath inside the ice. The night I finally spoke, it was by accident. We were in bed reading, I was not reading. I said, "How's the agave collection at the Harlow?" He blinked like I'd mispronounced a word. "What?" I showed him the receipt. He said, "Oh," and then he said nothing, and then, "You're tracking me." Not the words of an innocent man, but the words of a man who would like to change the subject. "I'm tracking our shared devices, Aaron, the little coin you put in your bag in case someone steals it. It told me where you were and where you were." He sat up, closed the book. "It's not what you think." "What do I think?" I asked, genuinely curious which version of me he'd decided to inhabit. "That I'm unhappy," he said, which was not a lie but not the truth I was asking for. He added, "I didn't plan." "Nobody plans to lie for sport," I said. "What's her name?" He turned away, the lamp made a circle of light behind his ear. He said, "It doesn't matter." "Of course it matters. Names turn the abstract into a door, which you have been closing in my face." He looked like a man asked to move a piano alone. "Maya," he said, and when he said my name like that, patient, compassionate, my husband, I had the urge to throw something fragile across the room just to hear it break. Instead, I got out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and walked down the block to the all-night bodega that sells flowers for people who want to apologize at 2 in the morning. I didn't buy flowers. I stood under the awning and watched the rain skip sideways in the streetlight and felt, for the first time in months, the ground beneath my feet. A good set designer knows when a floor won't hold. She braces. She builds in a secret beam. She keeps the line of sight clean so the audience forgets how much work it takes to keep a living room upright. When I got home, Aaron had fallen asleep with the lamp on. I turned off the light, stood in the doorway, and counted the seconds it took for my eyes to adjust to a room I had decorated with the wrong story. The next day, Ren texted, "You look like a house that needs paint." "Coffee?" She did not demand an answer. She never did. We went to a cafe that serves espresso like confession, standing room only, everyone practicing the art of needing something. Ren held her cup with both hands. "Is he kind to you?" she asked. "On paper, yes. And in the margins." I thought of the nick on his neck. "I don't know how to not make a home out of whatever I'm given," I said. "Then choose who brings in the chairs," she replied. We began to meet after rehearsal with the consent that never needed to be spoken. We did not talk about Aaron. We talked about bodies that refuse to do what they're told and lights that make your skin look like it remembers winter. We talked about the thrill of a good second draft. We went to the costume shop and let velvet pour through our fingers. Ren's hands smelled like graphite and oranges and something darker that made my mouth water. I started wearing lipstick again, not because anyone was looking, but because I enjoyed the quiet ritual of coloring in a boundary of myself. I told Aaron I wanted space. He moved to the guest room without asking why, as if he'd been waiting for directions he could finally follow. He cooked on weekends and wiped the counters so obsessively the granite gleamed like a lake. He sent me links to houseplants that clean the air. He smiled at my jokes with the effort of a man lifting weights. The guilt in his gaze was a kind of sexless intimacy. I wanted a different intimacy. One evening, alone in the theater after a run-through that left the actors raw, Ren and I wandered onto the set. The living room looked smaller without them inside it, like a coat on a hanger. She climbed into the window seat and tucked her knees under her chin. "You ever want to disappear inside your own work?" "All the time," I said. "That's how the work wins." She looked at me, not the way you look at an actor you're fixing, but the way you look at a room you'd like to sleep in. "Show me the kitchen you would design for yourself if nobody else ever needed a spoon." I led her onto the stage-right platform where we'd built a galley kitchen. It had a sink that didn't turn on, a fridge that didn't open, and a counter at the exact height of my hips because I am a tyrant about ergonomics even when the faucet is fake. "Here," I said, tapping the counter. "This is where the lemons are. Here the knife falls asleep because it got to cut something ripe. Here the radio plays an old soul song that doesn't belong to anyone in particular." And here, Wren asked, sliding closer, her palm on the laminate that pretended to be marble, her shoulder brushing mine like an argument she was tired of winning. Here, I said, someone stands and watches me, not like a guard and not like an audience, but like a person who is willing to let me take my time. She moved her hand to my wrist. And what do you do while you're being watched? I didn't answer with words. I turned, stood between her and the sink that wasn't a sink, and leaned in until I could feel the warmth of her mouth even before it touched me. The first kiss was a question mark. The second an underline. The third a sentence we wrote together with our eyes closed. I tasted graphite and oranges and the part of her I had been pretending not to crave, the steadiness. Her fingertips on my lower back were patient, persuasive, a kind of punctuation that said, "Here is where you breathe." We did not undress, we did not have to, we kissed again like people who had been good for too long. The theater around us listened and kept our secret the way old buildings do. When we pulled apart, she smiled with her eyes. "I am not a solution," she said. "I am not a problem," I answered. We agreed to move carefully, and then we didn't, not always. In her apartment there were plants that looked like deliberate messes and a mirror that made anyone standing in front of it more honest than they meant to be. She hung her jackets on a row of pegs at the front door and dropped her keys in a ceramic bowl that sounded like a bell. She kissed me in the kitchen while water boiled for pasta. She kissed me on the couch with our legs tangled until the cat came to sit in the empty space and looked offended. She kissed me like a woman who had learned the tempos of other people's bodies in order to hear her own more clearly. I learned the geography of her shoulder blades and the certainty of her laughter. There is an erotic charge to the everyday touches that no bedroom can rival: the hand that steadies a pot, the wrist that lifts a window, the mouth that pauses for a taste and goes back to speaking because conversation is its own hunger. We kept our clothes on often because some desires prefer the friction of fabric, the suggestion of a thing just out of reach. Some nights we reached anyway, and our bodies did what bodies do when trust is present. We were not pornographic, we were precise. A nip at the curve where neck becomes shoulder. The slow exploration of the inside of a wrist with lips that know how to listen. Hands that memorize, then repeat, then innovate. Skin answering skin like harmony. It would be so clean to say I left Aaron and walked straight into a better story. But endings are not doors, they're hallways with bad lighting. He asked to talk. I agreed. We sat at the dining table, the one we picked because it was large enough to hold a puzzle that nobody would finish, and I said I had kissed someone. He said he had slept with someone. We were even and not. I said her name, Wren. He said the other woman's name, Leela. It sounded like a wave that never learns where to break. "What do you want?" he asked, the first husband question that matters. "I want to live in a house where the truth can walk around without bumping into things," I said. "I want to cook with the back door open. I want to sleep next to someone who doesn't think a confession is a gift he needs to buy." He nodded slowly. "I don't know how to be that man for you," he said, and I believed him. There are people who are kind and smart and good with playlists and wrong for your lungs. We separated politely, which is its own violence. He took the good blender and the coffee grinder with a burr he loved like a son. I kept the heavy Dutch oven and the plant that would die in 2 weeks because I always forget to rotate it. We cried the way families cry, startled by our own salt. He hugged me when the movers left as if hugs belonged to no one. He told me he wanted me to be happy and I told him to get therapy. He did. He sends me links about houseplants sometimes. I do not click them. Wren and I did not tape a label to ourselves. We built instead what we needed in the room that each day offered us. She met my friends one by one, never rolling her eyes when they said, "You look so alive." I met her sister, who works in a bakery, and asked for my red velvet recipe and then laughed at herself for thinking I would share it. Reader, I did. We took a small trip to a salt marsh, a place that looks like the ocean got bored and decided to learn geometry. There we rented a cottage with a back door that opened to the smell of tide and possibility. We cooked scallops in butter that sighed under the heat. We bought cheap wine in a bottle that did the job and put it in the freezer for 15 minutes because impatience will always be a love language. In the mornings we walked along the edge of water and named things we'd never named before. Ostensibly birds, secretly hurts. In the afternoons she practiced a solo on the deck and I sketched a kitchen that would be honest about its corners. One evening the sky grew theatrical, a bruise knitting across the horizon and the power dropped for a beat. The bedside radio we'd brought from home crackled and stuttered, and then, for a second, caught a signal from somewhere else, an old torch song, the kind they write for women who spend nights lighting cigarettes they have no intention of smoking. We danced in the half-light like people who are about to be remembered by no one but each other. When the chorus came, Ren slid her hand to the small of my back and said, "I've got you." Then her mouth found the place below my ear where I carry a map of every room I've ever loved. We made out like teenagers who had found time in a house that wanted them busy. I learned again that you can turn the world with just the right notch of pressure at a hip. After we lay under the open window and listened to rain rehearse falling. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, not unkindly. "I regret not learning sooner how to listen to myself," I said. "I regret all the dinners where I knew something and chose to know it later." "Later is sometimes the only door open," she said, and we fell asleep with our feet touching like an ellipsis. When we got back to the city, the play opened. The critics said the living room was the star, which stung for the actors and embarrassed me. But I understood, people love a set that admits its tricks. I watched from the back row as the couple on stage tried to say the sentence that would save them and failed, and I heard the audience lean forward when they almost get there. That lean is the sound of hope. It's also the sound of denial. Even after I left Aaron, some part of me wanted him to call and say the perfect thing. He did not. He sent a photo of the plant I'd failed to keep alive thriving in the window of his new apartment. I didn't know how to read that, so I didn't. There should be a class on decoding the messages of people we no longer need to decode. Maybe I'll teach it one day. Lesson 1, delete without reading. Lesson 2, read without replying. Lesson 3, make a pie. We threw a party for the cast. Ren wore a linen shirt with the sleeves rolled and a neck that made me ache. She toasted the director. I toasted the scenic carpenters, the quiet miracle workers who can make a false wall stand like a promise. Later that night, after the last of the glasses had been rinsed in the theater sink, Ren and I walked home along the avenue with the faulty streetlights that blink like a flicker filter. She slid her fingers into mine with the casual intimacy of someone returning an item you hadn't noticed you'd dropped. "I'm not sure how to be anyone's girlfriend," she said, "but I am very good at being on your side." "You're already on my side," I said. "Then maybe the rest is dressing," she replied, and kissed me under an awning that did nothing to stop the rain but everything to make us look like we were framed on purpose. Months passed. We fought the way you do when you're no longer trying to keep a vase from falling but actually using the table for real life. She accused me of building escape hatches into every conversation. I accused her of turning every problem into choreography. We both accused Winter of arriving too early. We both forgave each other for being human. There is an erotic charge to a well-apologized apology. It's not the words, it's the door you open with them. Aaron met someone, or maybe he met himself. Either way, he softened and stopped sending photos of plants. Once crossing the street near the market, we saw each other from half a block away and both decided to wave. It felt like seeing a house you used to rent and remembering where the squeakiest stair was but not missing the squeak. He said, "You look happy." I said, "I'm hungry all the time," and he laughed, the good kind, the one that belongs to the person he is now. We stood there for longer than was normal and then shorter than a regret. When we parted, I didn't look back. I changed the kitchen. That's not a metaphor. I literally moved the island and sold the stools and bought 2 chairs with backs that feel like a hand. I painted the cabinets the color of fog. I left a bowl of limes on the counter because some promises you make to yourself are holy. Ren taught me to salt the rim of a glass with 1 pass instead of 3. I taught her how to make a vinaigrette that doesn't split. We collected knives the way some couples collect stories, slowly, carefully, using them often so they become what they are meant to be. She followed me to flea markets and never said no when I held up a lamp and said, "This one could save a life." I followed her to shows in black box theaters where the floor shook and the dancers made miracles out of nothing but muscle and air. Sometimes I wake to find her watching me, not like a guard and not like an audience but like somebody letting me take my time. On those mornings we do not rush. We breathe in a key that matches the coffee. We let our knees find the same country. We kiss in the kind of quiet that only belongs to people who have survived the rooms that tried to shush them. You want me to tell you what happened to the woman from the hotel, to Leela, the wave that never learned where to break? Here's what I know. She wrote me once an email with an apology dense as bread. She said she hadn't known, then she had known, then she hadn't known how to stop what knowing had started. She said she was sorry for the hurt and grateful for the light. I did not reply, not because I'm cruel, because some apologies are not for keeping. They're for teaching you which shelf to stop dusting. You might also want me to tell you whether what I did with Ren is the same as what Aaron did with Leela. It isn't a math problem. It happened after the marriage had slipped and before we had admitted it out loud. It happened because my hands remembered a truth my mouth was too kind to say. It happened because the body knows which door is the exit long before the head stops sketching a better map. If that makes me a villain in someone else's story, so be it. In mine, I am a woman who learned to listen to the room she had built and then had the courage to step into it. Sometimes I think about the moment at the bodega, rain neon, the idea of buying a bouquet at 2 a.m. because you want a certain kind of forgiveness. And I want to take that version of me by the shoulders and kiss her mouth until she believes me when I say, "You are not a problem to be solved by being delightful." But time does not bend for lectures. It leans for love sometimes. It pauses for a well-placed lamp. If you've read this far, I imagine you're building or unbuilding your own room. Maybe you found a receipt with a dessert for two when you only ordered one. Maybe your blue dot on a map is standing very still at a place you wish it had the decency to avoid. Maybe you've already kissed someone at a counter that pretended to be marble. Here's the only advice I can give that isn't a lie. Bring a bowl of limes into whatever space you're in, not because tequila fixes anything, because zest does. Because a bright, honest acid can cut through heavy sauces and save a meal. Because hands that curl around fruit remember strength. Because you deserve to reach for something sharp and find it friendly. Tonight the back door is open. The radio sighs an old soul song that belongs to nobody in particular. Ren is pinning a note to the corkboard that says "Buy peaches" and below it in smaller letters and time. I'm at the counter, knife asleep and then awake, cutting wedges for a drink that asks for nothing but attention. When she comes to kiss the place below my ear where I carry a map of every room I've ever loved, I lean into the kiss so the map can fold. We are not a better story. We are simply the one that is true. And truth, more than anything, is what makes a house a home. The kind with a door to the outside so you can bring in the morning and a window that lets the night know you are not afraid. If you're tempted to text me now and ask, "But what exactly did you do?" trust that I've told you everything that matters. The rest is dressing, the rest is choreography, the rest is the salt on the rim.